No, let me just say this. A lot of people don't know how I got here to Midvale Park, and a lot of it is Mr. Shirkey's fault. So what he doesn't realize is that I actually, well, he may know this, but I was just looking through pictures this morning, and I visited Midvale Park in 2008. 2008, I was, Chris Shirkey invited Michael Hazel to come and speak. And him and Gisele, his wife, who was a mentor of mine from Southern, were here in Arizona. And here, they were members at this church, Midvale Park, while he was at U of A doing his PhD. And so he invited me to come down here, and I came and heard the presentation and stayed for potluck. I remember we were starving. And then I left. But that was my first introduction to Midvale Park. And then, about 4 years ago, I was asked if I would be, well, I was actually putting in my resignation to no longer pastor. And Mr. Shirkey was looking for a pastor, and the church was looking for a pastor. And Mr. Shirkey and Mr. Peterson were really trying to figure things out, I guess. And anyway, long story short, I was at GYC in Orlando that year, and I was coming down the escalators. I remember this very clearly. I was going up, and Dr. Hazel was coming down the escalators, and he told me he just got off the phone with this guy named Chris Shirkey. And I'd never heard this name before, at least I don't remember. This guy named Chris Shirkey. And this guy was wondering if he knew anyone from Southern who would be willing to come and pastor in Tucson, Arizona. And so he said, no, I don't really have any graduates, maybe go that way. And then Dr. Hazel began telling me this story about how they're looking for somebody. And I said, right here, man, right here. I'm like pointing, with the arrows and everything. And he's like, oh, you'd be interested? Yes, I'd be very interested. But you're from Phoenix. So anyway, long story short, I guess Mr. Shirkey got my resume, and then the conference had gotten my resignation. But Pastor Keys, who's now the conference president, at that time was ministerial secretary, got my resume from that church, and also got my resignation around the same time, and said, don't resign just yet. I have a church that might fit you. And so he brought me down here. It was February, and I remember that meeting happened in January. February, I came for the interview, and then Mr. Shirkey asked one question, raised his hand, and this was my first introduction to Mr. Shirkey. He said, would you be willing to move to Tucson? You're from Phoenix. And I used to be from Phoenix. And the rest is kind of history. But ever since then, Mr. Shirkey and I have become very, very good friends. And probably after Mr. Peterson and now more recently Jimmy, Mr. Shirkey and I have talked probably the most. So I don't know, is there a special music or anything? No. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Shirkey, who would never preach for me, but is willing to share for AY, to come forward. You can cut the whole intro out and then just this.
The way you say I wouldn't preach for you. I preached a lot before you got here. Before I got run over by a SUV. But anyways, so I guess you know a little bit more about me. There are probably a lot of things that the pastor doesn't even know about me. I was born in Detroit, Michigan. Of course, I won't say nobody, but when you say Detroit or Chicago or whatever, it could be any one of a million suburbs. And I probably lived in most of those suburbs in Detroit. Single mother, older sister, younger brother, and my mother did about the best she could, trying to work and keep her head above water. And I didn't appreciate it then, but I appreciated it a lot later. But anyways, very, very young in my life, I was introduced to ice hockey. In Detroit, in the winter, if you dig a rink out with just mounds of dirt for the corners, the fire department will come out and fill it up for free. They want to keep the kids off the street. So we did that every single year. And I only remember skating before walking. I don't remember ever being able to walk. But I just loved ice hockey. So that's what my focus was. You know how people that play basketball and all that, they say, oh, I want to play big time. And so they just do it all the time. Well, that's what I did all the time. Obviously, I went to school, but I skated to school. Skated home from school. I had a game after school. I mean, we played back in those days, young people. Sun up to sundown, we were outside. We were not inside the house. And it just became my life's passion. So my mother decided that she was going to move to Phoenix, Arizona. And I said, I'm not going. I was 15. I'm not going. You know, I'm working on a career. And she said, well, you're going to have to go. I said, well, I'm not going right now. You know, I know you could be an emancipated minor if you wanted to be, you know, all that stuff, but I didn't want to go through that. So my sister stayed behind to try to sell the house. So as long as the house didn't sell, I was living there with my sister and continuing with my early life. But eventually the house sold. And I will never forget when I had to fly to Phoenix, Arizona, and they took me out to dinner that night trying to make it soften the blow, and I remember spending the whole night in the bathroom crying. I did not want to be in Phoenix, Arizona. I wanted to be where there was ice rinks and ice hockey and outdoors. I mean, I was so into hockey that during an outdoor game, my headband had slipped off. I never knew it. I was so into the game, and all of a sudden the referee blows the whistle, stops everything, grabs me, don't move. My ear was frozen, and half of my ear was frozen solid. So that set me back for about a week because I had to, you know, it bubbled up and I couldn't go outside. But anyways, that's how passionate I was about playing. I could have snot sickles and everything else, and you didn't know anything. You just played, right? But so, anyways, it's interesting that because when I told my story the first time, we were very early in our marriage, and we were at the Carefree Inn in a retreat. And I told the story to a couple of people at the pool, and they, oh man, you got to write a book. And I said, you know, well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that the Lord gets to people, but I don't know. But you know, now that I look back on it, and the pastor said you got to write a book, everybody says you got to write a book. I could actually write a book if I knew how. And it wouldn't be just on how it would be like one man's journey through life. You know, the way God led even before I knew who he was. Obviously, I always believed in God because I know that this stuff just doesn't happen, but I also believe that he was probably very distant and things just went on, and maybe when you died you went to heaven or whatever. But the first chapter could be the presidents. When I was 11 years old, I met John F. Kennedy. 1 year, short of a year before he was assassinated. My sister worked for his campaign. Shortly after that, after he was assassinated, we were in Washington, D.C., and the Secret Service took us through, my mother and my brother and my sister and I took us through a secret entrance, and we went through, and the elevators opened, and Lyndon Johnson came out. Good morning, how are you guys today, you know? And then later on, I worked for Stephen Shaddig in Phoenix, who ran Goldwater's campaign, and I buried Goldwater 2 or 3 times. But I wasn't very political, but still, that could be a chapter because, you know, there was some interest there. There could be the time when we accidentally helped somebody rob a bank. It's the honest truth. I could stand here for an hour and tell you everything we went through. The FBI is not fun to deal with. There's the time when they actually, almost the same time, they wanted to search my car, and I said, that's fine. And then I remembered I had a case of counterfeit $20 bills in the back of the truck, or back of my car, because I was going to wallpaper a wall in my apartment. Now, they were only printed one side, but it's still illegal. It's illegal to print one side. I mean, they could have hauled me off right away. There's, let me see, what other things do I have here? And of course, later chapters in my story could be all the wonderful miracles that the Lord has performed for my wife. I mean, my wife has been sick for years. We talk about deserving and undeserving. She never smoked, never drank, was a good girl, and she was stricken with a very nasty autoimmune disease that kind of destroyed a lot of her health over the years. But the Lord has always brought her through. The doctors were amazed. But anyways, let me get to my story. So my hockey career came to a screeching halt when I herniated 2 discs in my back, in the lower back, the bad ones. And back then, if you got your back fused, you were fused. I mean, you were like Frankenstein. It's not like today where they've got flexible rods and all that stuff. So I never did get that done. I went through lots of physical therapy, treatments, et cetera, and I could still play hockey, but never I'm not even close to the capacity that I could before that. So that's the first time the Lord got my attention. You know, you're not going to play hockey, except recreationally maybe. So then I thought, what am I going to do, man? I got to do something with my life. And I wasn't a great student by any means. I managed to get through 12 years of school, which you could get away with back then. You can't do that anymore. Walked into a print shop that my friend was working in, and I said, I'd like a job. And he said, well, what do you know about printing? I wasn't a Christian. Remember, I wasn't a Christian. And I said, oh, I'm taking a camera class at the local college, and it's really interesting. I'd really love to learn the business. And I went through the whole interview, and he said, maybe someday. And I left. Barely got home. I was staying with my friend. I barely got home. And I get a call, and he says, be here tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And he gave me the worst possible job you could possibly have. All of the printing presses, they have this gucky ink, that is a reservoir that they have to clean out and throw away every day, and I had to clean every one of those. I mean, I had ink up to here. And I got it all done, and I said, anything else? And he said, no. He said, you're hired. Long story short, a couple years later, I became the assistant manager of the store, and then I became a manager of a store in Scottsdale. The store in Scottsdale, the gentleman that owned the store before I took over management was a Seventh-day Adventist, but I didn't know that. I don't even know what a Seventh-day Adventist was. Here I was raised in Michigan, and in school we used to go to Battle Creek, and I still never ever heard the name Seventh-day Adventist. Now, maybe I was thinking about hockey, I don't know, but it was amazing to me, and I didn't even know he was a Seventh-day Adventist. So before I got that Scottsdale store, I was the assistant manager of the central store in Phoenix. And life was good. I mean, I was on my way up. I knew that I was being groomed to manage my own store, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't a Christian, so remember this, and we also lived in the age of Aquarius. I had lived with a couple of women, girls, young girls, my age. I mean, I was in my early 20s. See, I told you I didn't want to talk about this. I mean, my wife here, she's a goody-goody, and then we get married, and I have this passion. She said, you've been married 3 times. I said, no, I have never been married, because I was never going to get married. I guess it was because of my mother, having so much problem. I mean, my brother and my sister and I are half brothers and sisters. So I said, marriage doesn't work, I'm never going to get married. But here I'm on my way up, and I happen to be living with this girl. Actually, this was my home away from home in Phoenix. Now, many rinks, we used to play games in Albuquerque and Las Vegas and LA, San Diego. And this is free skate, obviously. I had to dig this up to bring this today. This is like from 1973. So that's an open skate. Go ahead and do the next one. Go ahead and do the next slide. Okay, now this is a bar, a lounge, that's at the end of the ice skating rink. So I was at that age and I couldn't play hard anymore, so we would play a senior game and we'd go in the bar. This became my home away from home, away from home. But things were going well. go ahead and show the apartment that I was living in, the next one. Okay, now this is the apartment that I was living in at that time. And the important thing to remember about this is it goes from one end to the other, and I was like right in the middle on the second floor. One day, I'm there and I was living with this girl, and one day, a girlfriend from Michigan just popped in at my door. I go, Phyllis, wow, what are you doing here? I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you. I don't know what to do. I know you'll know what to do. And I said, well, wait a minute, okay? And I told my girlfriend, I said, we're gonna go talk, which was, I was cold. I knew how to treat a woman as far as taking her out and all that, and I knew how to treat her, but sometimes it was like, what kind of guy are you? So we go to a place called Minder Binders, next picture. Because I wanted to go somewhere where we could talk and nobody would be hearing us. And this was in Tempe. It's a multi-level, go ahead and do the next one. That's what it looks like. If there's stairs going all over, there's a million places where you can hide in there. And you can sit, in a small table and nobody's going to hear you because there's just, air hockey and pool and everything's going on. I don't know how many that live here in Tucson ever went to the Bum Steer. It was the same type of thing. So we went there and she starts telling me this story. She'd gone from Michigan to San Diego. And she was on her way back to Michigan, and it was her last night, and she was really depressed because she had just broken up with her friend. And she said, I was walking down Mission Beach, just thinking, what am I going to do? I'm going home tomorrow. How am I going to deal with this? And this guy walks up to me, and I noticed he had this necklace on with this pendant on it. And you can go ahead and show that. Okay? She says, I don't know what it meant, but the guy says to me, he says, hey, I know you're going home tomorrow. You want to come to a party? And she, how does he know? How does this guy know me? How does he know I'm going home tomorrow? Well, I guess. So they go down the beach and they go into this party. In the back room of the party, there's a seance going on. And she's kind of peeking in, watching. She doesn't know anybody. They gave her a drink, and she's kind of looking in and sees that it's almost breaking up. And so she starts to get closer and looks in. And the main lady that was doing the seance stands up and she goes, Phyllis, come on in. How does this lady know who I am? I mean, what is this all about? So she said, I walked in and she says, here, I've got somebody you even need to talk to. She dialed the phone and she handed it to Phyllis. Never touched anything, gave it to Phyllis, put it in her ear, and she goes, Phyllis, I know you're on your way back to Michigan. I need you to stop by and see me. I'm in New Mexico. I have a picture of you on my dresser. You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. And you're very special to me. You really got to stop and visit me before you leave. And she's totally freaked out, leaves, and the next morning gets in her car and she comes to talk to me. And what does this dummy say? He says, you gotta check it out. You're gonna spend the rest of your life going, what was that all about? You gotta stop. And she says, yeah, but I don't know, you hear about people disappearing, I said, well, here's what you gotta do. I said, you gotta go in to the nearest police department, tell them a little bit of your story. They might think you're crazy if you tell them too much, but tell them you're gonna go visit this person and you don't know if it's gonna be positive or negative, and if you don't show up in a half hour, you'd like them to come to that address. And then she's gone. And we hadn't talked to each other in years before this happened. So she's gone, and my life goes on, and my wife might not agree with this, but I'm kind of a neat freak for a guy. And my apartment, I like everything put away and nice and neat and everything. And put a picture up of the apartment. Well, this is a drawing that my son-in-law did. This isn't going to work. There we go. This is the front door, the living room area. My stereo is there, kitchenette, dining room, and then it goes into like a vanity area, but this is where the sink and everything is, and then it goes into another room, which is the bathroom, and then, of course, the master bedroom. And the master bedroom is huge. This closet is huge. This closet, you could actually put a bed in, and somebody could sleep there if they had to. And I like everything in its place. So I would always make sure that the door was closed. And I'd come home, and the door would be open. And I would say to her, "You left the door open again." "I didn't leave the door open." "Yes, you did, because I didn't do it. You must have done it." And this happened quite often until we actually kind of got into an argument about it. She says, "It's not me. I'm not doing it." And I mean, I checked the door. It latches. There's no way you can even open it without, turning the handle hard. And it's still happening over a period of probably 2 weeks. So one night we're in bed, and all of a sudden, in the kitchen cupboard, all of the dishes go boom, and made this huge noise. Didn't break them. Just somebody took a hand and just moved them all the way to one side of the cupboard. And of course, was like, you go check that. I'm not going to go check that. I don't know what that was. So next morning, I go in there and look, and all the dishes are over to one side. And she didn't do it, and I didn't do it. So I didn't know what was going on. Those kind of things were happening on a regular basis. We were arguing all the time about, don't be afraid. Yeah, I'm not going to stay here. Yes, you are. We've got a lease, blah, blah, blah. She finally moved out. And here I am, this big, I was, 200, almost 6'5", 220 or 210 pounds at the time. A hockey player that's not afraid of anything. And I'm living there, and I wasn't afraid. There's just dishes, It just. Let me say one thing. After I became a Christian, I really but I studied about spiritualism. There's a big difference between demon harassment and demon possession. Right? Okay, so this was harassment. Let me see, I got to get it in the right order. So, one day I come home from work, come to the front of the door, and I use the key. It's a nice, easy door to open, and somebody's pushing the other side. And I can't get in. And I'm going, "Stop it!" And the door opened. And there's nobody in there. And I had talked to my landlord and said, "You don't have a key to my apartment." "No, we change all the locks every time if somebody moves out, blah, blah, blah." And that kind of freaked me out a little bit. So the next thing is, a few weeks later, I'm in that middle area, right in here. Let me see if I can get this to work. Right in here. And I'm getting ready. I keep this door closed because obviously there's like a picture window here, and it shows right through there if somebody's going to watch you run around. And back in those days, when I had hair, men used to have what was called a hot comb. It was like a little hairdryer with a big comb on it, and guys worked on their hair, right? It was very masculine. Joe Namath did it. It's okay. And so I'm working on my hair and the noise, and we're getting ready to go out, to party. And the outside door, somebody starts banging. "Hey, Chris, let me in." And I thought, wow, this sounds like Blake. So I rushed out, opened the door, and I looked both ways, and there was nobody. And I got there fast enough that nobody could have gotten down the stairs. And I could have visually seen somebody getting down the stairs. And I knew it was Blake's voice. Blake went to Alaska to work on the pipeline. He was one of our friends. So I'm back in, so I got ready, went out that night, and I was running around the varsity, and they said, "Hey, Blake's in town, man." "No, he's not. He's in Alaska." "No, he's in town. He came to my door. He's pounding on my door to give me a hard time. I know he's going to be here, He never showed up. And Next weekend, the pounding was on the inside door. I mean, I was right there. Bah, 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 bah. Chris, let me in, let me in, let me in. And I opened the door and there was nobody there. And the hair on the back of my head stood up. I got ready as good as I can. I got out the door and went out and had a nice time. Talked to myself and said, maybe you're just overworked. Because I was really burning the midnight oil, getting ready to operate the first store. Maybe that really didn't happen. Maybe I'm just, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. There's nothing there. Why should I be afraid? There's nothing there. So I came home that night and I had a few drinks. And there's my stereo right there. And I usually come in when I really want to unwind and I sit at my couch, put on my headsets, and put on a mellow type of an album. The one I was listening to happened to be the Eagles' Desperado, which was one of my favorites. And it's kind of a Western light rock. And I'm sitting in there and I'm listening and I'm relaxing and all of a sudden, hello, Chris. Boom! I threw off the headsets. I go, whoa, I must have fallen asleep. I must be dreaming. Well, burned on that record was those words. And I even showed it later to a lot of my friends, and they said, oh, how'd you do that? I said, I didn't do that. This is what happened. Well, that can't happen. And that was back in the days when they were talking about playing stuff backwards and all that kind of stuff. So they figured that somehow I had tampered with it and got that. But it never happened. And I hung on to the album for a few years, and then I decided, after I became a Christian, I decided, destroy this thing, right? But now it's starting to get hairy. It's starting to get a lot worse. So one night I come home from work, really tired, a little freaked out. What's going to happen tonight? Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And so I'm in my bed. Now it's not going to work. Yeah, it's not working. Anyways, I'm in my bed, and there's a TV right here, and I'm watching TV, and the door's open. And as I'm watching TV, this actor comes on. His name is Orson Bean, and he's kind of a little on the edge, and he kind of is into spiritualism a little bit. He's got these theories about what happens in the story, the house had 666 on it, and, something happened here. So I'm listening to this on The Tonight Show. And all of a sudden, on the corner of my eye, I see this cloud go by. And I thought, no, that was just, that's just my peripheral vision. It was just something. And I'm listening, and he's telling a story about this house that they bought. He and his wife had bought the house. They moved in. And every night, this figure would go into the baby's room. They had a baby about a year earlier. And it would go into the baby's room, and it would stand over the crib. And he was kind of into, like, who cares? It's not going to, no big deal. And so he researched, and he found out that the person who would own the home was a doctor who had performed a lot of illegal abortions. And so his theory was that this guy is stuck here because of what he had done, and he's remorseful, and so he looks over the baby and admires the baby. What's wrong? Oh, you got a laser? I don't know if I'll need it anymore, but bottom one? Okay. So as he's doing that, I see this cloud go by again. And I didn't drink that night. I was sober. And I thought, wow, I'm going to leave the TV on until I fall asleep. No, I'll turn the TV off. Turn the TV off, and all of a sudden the cloud came into my room, alongside my bed, a big white cloud, kind of like you see in the cartoons, and it sat on the end of my bed, and the bed went down as if a 200-pound person sat there. And I, like a little kid, I flipped myself over, put my head in a pillow, and I was terrified. And all I could think of was to get out. Right there's a sliding glass door and a balcony that falls down to a concrete slab. But all I could think of was to get out and get out there. Just run as fast as you can. The next thing I know, I wake up and it's morning. I passed out from fear. And I never knew that that was even possible. But I was so terrified that my body just shut down. And I thought, man, I'm not going to ever go through this again. And I went to work, and I was extremely depressed. And I talked to this gentleman who had the Scottsdale store, the Seventh-day Adventist. His name is Ray. And he says, you sound really down. I said, man, Ray, I think I'm having a nervous breakdown. He goes, yeah, why? It's stress? And I said, no, I can't tell you. I said, but there's things going on that totally unexplainable, and I just can't deal with it anymore. I don't know what to do. No, you can tell me. I'm not going to make fun of you or anything. I'll understand. I said, okay, you better not. I said, but I told him the things that were happening. He says, I believe you. I said, you believe me? He said, I believe you. But let me tell you what it is. Do you have a Bible? And I said, I think so. Everybody's got a Bible. You got to have a good luck charm in your home. And but I didn't. So the next day he gave me a Bible. Or that day he gave me a Bible. He came over to visit the other owner, and he gave me a Bible. But he gave me a Bible study on the phone. I mean, I don't know how we got away with it. We were on the phone for about an hour and a half. And nobody missed me, which was good. And he told me about the great controversy. And he told me about how there was war in heaven. And a third of the angels were wiped out into earth, and they came to earth. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with supernatural beings, fallen angels, evil angels. Well, I don't want to deal with evil angels. And he said, well, here's what I want you to do. When you go home tonight, you open the Bible to the 23rd Psalm, and you recite those words, put it on your dresser, leave it open there, recite those words. When you get in bed, just go to sleep. And I think, you know how to pray? Well, I think I was praying the other night, but I mean, it wasn't much. I don't know if it was the correct way, but I was just begging for this to go away. So he taught me a little bit about how to pray. And so I got on my knees on the other side of the bed, away from the door, and I had prayer. Got in bed, thing was there. And about a half hour later, no cloud, no nothing, the bed went down, just as if somebody sat on it. And I rolled over, and I started praying, and it climbed on my back. It was like a 200-pound person was on my back, breathing on my neck, and I passed out. I'm serious. I totally passed out. So I said to myself, I'm done. I'm not staying here anymore. And he said, no, don't give up. He said, did it hurt you? Well, I don't know. I mean, my heart might be damaged, but I don't, not really. It breathed on me. No, don't worry about it. Just keep praying. Keep claiming promises. And by the way, when I woke up the next morning, the Bible was thrown on the floor. Now, I didn't pass out and do that. Somebody else did it. So I did this for a few nights, praying, and nothing would happen. And nothing would happen. And it seemed to be kind of gone. And I thought, okay, this is good. This is the way this works. And one night I came home with a friend of mine, had been gone for the weekend, stayed at his place for the weekend. We came home on Sunday, and I had a nice aquarium of angelfish and some, all different kinds of fish, some little sharks and things like that. All fish that got along and didn't eat each other. And so I got home, and the door did the same thing. And I said, Vince, do the door. And he goes, what's wrong? I said, quit it. And it opened up. He said, how'd you do that? And I said, I've been telling you there's something going on. I mean, this place is haunted. And he said, no, it's not. I said, well, come on in for a few minutes. So he comes in, and we're sitting there. I'm on the couch. He's on one of the chairs, and we're talking. And all of a sudden, I look over, and all my fish are gone. And I said, Vince, my fish are gone. Well, are you supposed to have fish? Maybe the landlord came in and took them away. No, you can have fish. The landlord doesn't have a key. My fish are gone. We took the whole tank apart, drained all the water, and at the very end, in the filter area, we spun all these bones. So that's 2 days. All of those fish died and decayed and were gone. It doesn't happen that way. I said, I'm not staying here. And so I went to his place, and I lived out of his place for the rest of the week. Went to talk to the landlord about getting out of my lease, because I only had a short time left. And he let me out because he had somebody the place was full, and he had people that wanted to rent. So I was able to move out of there, and I actually moved in with, it was a 3-bedroom house, and he and his girlfriend and I had my own room. And then things got good again. No more problems. So again, all I knew was that place was haunted. So I wasn't talking to Ray that much anymore. I mean, I was talking to him, but we weren't. He never pushed religion. He just says, how are things going? It's going great now that I'm out of there, Well, that's not how it works. Well, it worked that way for me, so I'm happy, And so I really wasn't interested that much into knowing too much more. It's all taken care of. My life is good. I'm on my way up, making decent money, going out, having fun, unencumbered, date different girls, and I wasn't always ugly, so it was. I had no problem getting dates. Let's say that. They like hockey players. And then all of a sudden one night, I called him up, and see, because when I was managing the Scottsdale store, his wife was working for me for a short period of time while he went to the Thunderbird Academy to run their laundry. And I didn't even understand what that was, and I didn't care. But that's why he sold the store back, and that's why I took over the store. But his wife needed a job, so she stayed back and she worked with me. And that was Lenore's third cousin. How those Mexicans work, man. And so she probably already had me all eyed up for her, right? Because I wasn't a bad guy, really. As far as the society was, I was a model citizen. As far as what the Lord expects, I was a mess. But so I called him one night. Because I was a manager, I had all these salesmen coming in, always wanted to give me stuff. Tickets to the Suns basketball game or whatever. And at the time, the World Hockey Association had a team in Phoenix. And he used to give me tickets all the time, and I used to go all the time. So one night I didn't take a date that night. I had an extra ticket, so I called him. And it was Saturday afternoon. I called him. I said, hey, would you like to go to the hockey game tonight? Oh, yeah, I'd love to, because he'd been a couple times. I said, okay, let me see. I'll pick you up at, about 5:45. How about a little later than that? I said, well, I want to get there early enough to get, to watch the warm-up. And, he said, because when I went to a hockey game, I really analyzed it. I watched the warm-up. I could tell you who was going to be on that night, who was going to be off, which goalie was going to be the best. I just was zeroed in on it. I was obsessed with it. Fanatic, And so he gives me a time, and I said, okay. And I didn't know that there was a Sabbath, and that he didn't want to leave until after the Sabbath. And I'm thinking, man, we're going to be late. Parking's going to be terrible. I'll park a million miles away. And so I go in, and Lenore was visiting them. And I'll never forget, she was standing in a doorway, and Ray invited me in. He said, hey, I want you to meet Alice's cousin. And I saw her, and she was pretty. She's pretty. She's real pretty. Okay, I'll say that. She's real pretty. Because she's right there looking at me. But I had dated and was dating a lot of girls that were pretty. And usually, I had to get to know somebody before there was any kind of an attachment. But I just looked at her, and I don't know what happened. But I just kind of something went like that. And so we left, and we're walking down his driveway, and I said, so when we get back, am I going to get to go in and meet this girl? And he goes, oh, you don't want to meet her. You don't want to get involved with her. Her dad will shoot you, get a shotgun out. Because he knew I was a heathen, and she wasn't, right? And so all through the game, I don't even remember what happened. I don't remember anything other than, man, when are we going to get back to his place? I want to meet this girl, right? And so we're all done, and he says, yeah, you can come in for cocoa. And I'm going, cocoa? We're going to have cocoa? Okay. No beer, just cocoa? That's fine. So we get there, and we all get our cocoa, and we sit down, and Lenore and I start talking. And it went okay for about 5 minutes. And then I said, we're going to have to go dancing some night. She goes, I don't dance. I go, you don't dance? What do you mean you don't dance? That's the clubs. That's what's happening. And then we kind of started picking on each other. And I said, I don't know what that thing was. It ruined my whole hockey game. I don't know why, because that girl is not for me. I did not want to go out with that girl. And she didn't want to go out with me. So time went by. How many months? 3 months? 3 months went by, and I was always the life of the party. I'm serious. I mean, I always had to make sure everybody was having a good time, everybody was taken care of. Everybody liked me, everybody invited me to every one of their parties. And for 3 months, I was miserable. I couldn't get into any of that. And it got to the point where, what's wrong with you, man? We would be at a club, and I wouldn't, a girl would ask me to dance. No, thanks. That's not like you. And I was just absolutely miserable. And I knew that something was wrong, and this girl was meant for me, but I didn't know why. And I wasn't a Christian, but God was there. And finally, and this is another arrogant thing that I did. Alice kept asking me, oh, don't you want to go out with? No. And finally one day, I came in and I realized what my problem was, and I said, call your cousin and tell her I'll go out with her. That was pretty arrogant. And she got all excited, and she calls Lenore, and she goes, Lenore, he's going to take you out. No, he's not. I'm not going out with him. And she goes, please, he's a nice guy. Please go out with him. Nope. Oh, and by the way, when she met me the first time, I had a really long hair, which was okay back then. That was the style. It was a little shorter, and I was a little out of style, but I was a little more rebellious, I guess. And during that 3-month period, the Scottsdale store that I was running, next door was Milano Music City, and there was always a lot of signings there. Glenn Campbell would come all the time. Upstairs was High Haircutters, and all the stars that came into Phoenix to perform, they always went there to get their haircut. So I broke down one time and said, I'll spend some money to get my haircut there, because I'll get it done like really good instead of shaggy. And they kept cutting. I said, shorter. So then I got it to where I liked it. But it was really short for me. So she convinced Alice. She said, you owe me. You're going to go out with him at least one time. You owe me. I know you're going to like him. And at that time, they were fully moved into Thunderbird Academy. They were living in one of the homes over there. He was running the laundry. I had lost touch with him for quite a bit of time. And he told me how to get there, and I'm driving, because I'm in the middle of Phoenix, Scottsdale. And I get in there, and I pull in, and I go, wow, am I in Oz? This is, because back then it was really, really primitive. It was nice, but it wasn't city at all. It was like driving right into the country. And I said, no, this is bizarre. This is really nice out here. Quiet, you can see the stars. And so I go to pick her up, and she saw me. What did you think, honey? Wow, this guy looks good. I heard. So we went out, and we tried to have a good time. I knew all the best places. I really knew how to date women. It wasn't just go to a movie and go home. It was dinner, dancing, cocktail afterwards. It was the full night. As far as the world goes, that was the way to do it. Even though I never had a father, I learned all my social graces by watching TV. Because back in those days, you had Father Knows Best, you had Leave It to Beaver. Those were my dads. You know, My Three Sons, Courtship of Betty's Father. Those guys were great role models back then. It's not that way anymore. But anyways, so we went out and went to the nice places, and yet things were kind of not perfect. I mean, we went to a really nice restaurant where you know, all the stars that come to Scottsdale go to, and they put us right near the kitchen. Never done that before. But we tried to make the best of it. And here I am smoking and drinking, and I'm out with her, right? She tolerated it. And if I know her, now that I know her for 43 years, I know that her wheels were going, and she's going, hey, he's not going to be doing that much longer. But, and so then we'd go to a movie or something. You know, she took me to Gone with the Wind. I'd never seen Gone with the Wind. So in this Kiva Theater in Scottsdale, this huge cinema, I mean, it was nice. It was really nice. I mean, I was learning how to kind of come down a little bit from the lifestyle that I was used to. Long story short, we dated for 6 months or 3 months. When did we get engaged? But how many months have we been dating? 1.5? Wow, you're a fast worker, honey. So we've been dating 1.5 months. We got engaged. And I mean, I was mellowing out. I didn't even care about any of the friends that I used to have. And 4th of July, which was 3 more months later, 5.5 months later. Yeah, okay, from the time we met, it was 6 months. So we got married. I got baptized. I mean, as soon as I met her, and I realized that Seventh-day Adventists don't divorce, which I didn't know that they did, but I heard that they don't. I thought, I'm not afraid to get married now, because I know that this girl is not going to want a divorce someday, you know, like everybody else. Because I had my best friend. We both bet each other that we'd never get married, and he got married before I did. And I thought, I won, you know. But anyway, so I thought, Adventists don't divorce. So we really, you know, she would come up to Phoenix one weekend, I'd come down here the next weekend. And I was really bummed out about Tucson because there really wasn't anything good to do compared to up there. I mean, there were roller coasters and all that kind of stuff up there. But anyways, I went through Bible studies. I got serious about finding out about this religion. And I did not get baptized for her, but she was probably the catalyst that the Lord used to push me into wanting to know more. And I'm my own person. I would have studied it, and if I didn't agree with it, I would have walked away. But I took it in like a sponge. I couldn't believe there was actually a reason for life. I mean, and everything made sense. Everything made sense. I mean, it covered everything, every aspect of life, questions, etc. So I studied and I studied and I studied, and I wanted to study faster than they wanted to study. And went through all of the Bible studies, read numerous chapters of The Great Controversy, and because he was an elder, Ray was an elder, and then the pastor up there, Gary Strunk, took me into his office and quizzed me like I'd never been quizzed before. He said, "You're ready." I said, "Okay, let's do it." We got married on one Sabbath. I mean, I got baptized on one Sabbath, and we got married not even a week later. We got married on Thanksgiving Day, 1975. And didn't have to make Thanksgiving dinner that year. Went to a nice restaurant, and then we took off for our honeymoon, which was not an eventful honeymoon compared to what the pastor does. I mean, it was in America. It was in the West, actually. But it was really, really neat. One of the things I forgot to mention in the beginning that would make a nice chapter was the day I had to go unknowingly to collect a debt from the mafia. You know, because I was a big guy. And so everybody wanted me to do all the stuff. And so they sent me down to the Continental Bar. My boss sent me down to the Continental Bar to collect from this company called Southwest Land and Cattle, which was Joe Bonanno Jr.'s business. Joe Bonanno was a big dude, and this guy was a second big dude. And I went in, and I said, and it's a bar. And I went in, and I said, I'm here to see Joe Bonanno Jr. Who are you? I said, well, I'm from the print shop came to collect some money. He said that he'd have a check for us. Goes in, comes back, pulls me in there. What do you want? I said, Bill told me to come down and get some money. Oh, he told you to come get some money, huh? Well, he said you promised him some money. He opens a briefcase full of money, and he takes a wad and he throws it at me. Tell him that'll hold him over. So, I don't know why I got myself into so many different predicaments, but the Lord always took care of me long before I became an Adventist. And when you get past and are married, I know what I wanted to tell you. What's that? Oh, yeah. So here I'm going to get baptized. And one of the things they're telling me is, your whole family's going to disown you, because our family's all Baptists. And they're good Baptists. They go every Easter and every Christmas. But they're Baptists. Southern Baptists. I mean, when they're in the South, they can't drink and they get upset, but they're Southern Baptists. And I said, that's fine. No, I'm serious. Your mother and your brother and your sister may just disown you. It's life. So I got in the car, drove to San Diego where my mother was living, and I got there and I said, hey, Mom, we visited a little bit. I said, I got something really important to tell you. She goes, no, I got something important to tell you. I said, no, I said it first. She goes, no, I mean, really, I've got something important to tell you. And she says, I'm studying to be a Seventh-day Adventist. And I said, I'm already ready to be a Seventh-day Adventist. I know. And then I said, that seals it, man. The Lord he's moved all the chess pieces. He's got everything in place. And if you doubt the fact that there is such a thing as demon harassment, and here's my theory. I found out later. I didn't talk to Phyllis, but I talked to my mother, who talked to Phyllis. She didn't go to the police department. She went to the street with the house that she was supposed to go to, and she was stopped at the corner, a little dirt lot. She started to get out and look down the street if she could see the house. And she found this ring, which you can put the next one up. She found this ring, which was the exact same ring, the exact same symbol as what the guy had in his neck. Oh, and actually before she did that, she stopped in a small little diner, and she was sitting there trying to convince herself to go to this house, and some guy came in and said, do you mind if I sit here with you? She said, no, and he sat down, and he had the same pendant on. And she says, no, I've really got to go, I'm in a hurry. So then she got in the car, went to that street on the corner. She saw that ring on the ground. She picked it up, put it in her car. She went down the street, and she asked the neighbor, and the neighbor said, that house burnt down last night. And the lady was killed. She was in it. The little old lady she died. She went back to Michigan. She went to Wayne State University, took them the ring, and they said, oh yeah, they named what cult it was part of, et cetera, et cetera. How they knew, obviously it was Satan telling them, but how they knew who she was, where she was going when she never met any of them it just boggles the mind. There's a lot more out there than we know about. And my theory is that I would have been okay if I wouldn't have said, you gotta check it out. And I really was saying, I'm interested in this. And those demons said, hey, you got to let us go, Lord. Great controversy. You can't stop us. If he's interested, you got to let us go. And now I know. But if you doubt the fact that it really happened, because a lot of my friends still don't believe, even though they heard the thing. Still, in our first year of marriage, I'm going to embarrass us a little bit, honey. Here, I came from the world. She's a good girl. First year, Pastor and I were talking about this the other day when he was talking about doing marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling. The first year, people have to really know it's a real adjustment period. And Lenore was convinced that I was going to be a womanizer because she couldn't possibly believe that I could change so quickly. So she was a very jealous person. And we were arguing one night because these girls were living in the same complex we were. And I said, we were arguing, and it got heated. I mean, it wasn't physical, but it got heated. And she was leaning against the door, yelling, and all of a sudden the door launched her into my arms. And she said, I'm sorry. Let's pray. And that's it, man. See, honey, it can happen. Stay on your good behavior, because if we don't, they're going to bother us. And there were other things that a little bit of harassments that we had, but basically that's how I came to the Lord. And then I've already given my testimony about my first management job, and that is on our website, I think, isn't it, Pastor, about the Sabbath keeping?
Yeah, but you can, a lot of these guys don't know, right? So.
But they can watch it.
Don't worry, say it again.
We'll be here another hour. It's a long, long story.
It's the Sabbath.
Wow. No, I'm sweating is what the problem is. Okay, so the store that I was managing, I had been groomed to run that store because Ray, who was leaving because he had fought with them for 2 years about keeping the store closed on the Sabbath. Because all print shops are open on the Sabbath. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's one of their busiest days. And so they had been grooming me to get in there, and I was taking Bible studies, and I decided I was going to be baptized, and I was going to be getting married. And when Bill found out that I wasn't going to open the store, my boss, the big boss, who had groomed me for 2 years, he said, if you don't open that store on Saturday morning, turn your keys in, you're done. And I'm getting married like 6 days later, 5 days later, whatever it was. And I thought, I don't care. I'm not going to open it on the Sabbath. How can I do that? The Lord I just met. How could I possibly disappoint him and give in? Because I know that it's the right thing to do. And I know that somehow he'll take care of us. Now, she was in the medical field, so maybe that was a little bit of a thing I had out there, like, yeah, she can support me for a while. But I got baptized. Went in the next day, Central Phoenix office, walked up to his desk, threw my keys on the desk, and I said, "Sit." No, wait a minute, let's talk about it. And I said, well, you're the one that told me. He said, let's just talk about it. So we sat down and we talked, and I knew what was going to happen was he was going to keep me around until he found somebody to take my place. Because they weren't going to tolerate it. If they just fought this guy for 2 years, and I mean really fought him through attorneys and everything, that they weren't going to keep me around forever. But I thought, well, as long as I can be here, and I did my job, did a great job, and the Scottsdale store thrived. The Lord, if you're faithful, man, it wasn't me. If you're faithful, you will thrive. I can remember later on, I'll talk about that later. But anyways, so month after month after month, and the bonus checks were coming in, the place was growing and things were getting better, and there was no problem except for the 2 guys in Tucson. See, it was an Arizona corporation, or actually it wasn't even a corporation yet. No, it was a corporation at that point. And so Bill, the big boss, was my boss, was the president. The 2 guys down here were the vice president, secretary, treasurer. And then if you're in a corporation that votes 2 against 1, 2 gets their way. So they wanted me out of there. And he fought tooth and nail to keep me in there. The store's growing. Leave them alone, And there were some harassments from them. They came down and went through my books one day like I was stealing from them. And when they left, I told Bill, I said, I don't want them ever in here again. I don't care who they are. I'm running the store honestly. And if you want to look at them, that's fine. But I don't ever, and if they want to look at them, I'll give them to them. But I don't ever want them walking in and doing that again. That really insulted me. No, they won't do it. Every year, they have an annual convention. The annual convention gets all of the store owners and all of the store employees together in one location for a weekend. And they have what they call business games. So that year, I was in Phoenix, we were in Phoenix. That year, it was in Rio Rico. And so the guys were saying, you're going to be there? No, I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be there on the Sabbath. It's Friday night. I'd missed half of it because they all come home Sunday morning. And they gave Bill a hard time, and I said, Bill, here's what I'll do. I'll help you write the whole entire agenda. write the games, all the different games that they do. And I mean, when I say like games, it's like you're in your hotel room and the phone rings and you answer it. You're supposed to answer it as if you're an employee answering for your company. And whoever does the best job gets a nice big prize and all that kind of stuff. But there were all kinds of other types of things that we had written. And so I helped him put the whole thing together. And did a great job. We both did a great job. He gets in his car and he goes down on Friday. I go home to my wonderful Sabbath. And Monday morning, I come in and I'm getting calls from the guys in the other stores. Man, you should have been there. I said, why? He says, Bill leveled the secretary treasurer. We were at the first night, the meet and greet night, and they were all drinking, and they started giving him a hard time about you. And he just decked them in front of everybody. And I thought, oh man, that's not my fault. I didn't do it. And Bill got in his car and came right back that night. Never called me, never said anything. The next thing I know, he never said anything to me. The next thing I know, he's filing to break up the corporation. And they ended up dividing all of the Phoenix stores and all of the Tucson stores. And Bill got the Phoenix stores, and those guys got the Tucson stores. And of course, I'm in Phoenix, so that's good. Scottsdale, Phoenix, whatever. And I thought, wow, broke up. They had been partners for a long time before I got around. And things just continued to grow, things got better, but then all of a sudden we decided that we were going to start a family. And Phoenix was a lot better than it is now, but it was a big city. Scottsdale was a big city. And we thought, well, number one, we thought we'd never be able to buy a house in Scottsdale, probably couldn't pay the property taxes. But we thought, what's Tucson like? And I hated Tucson. When we were dating back and forth, I hated Tucson. Because, you're on the freeway, everything's good, and all of a sudden you hit boom, 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 boom. Halfway, the road starts getting worse. And it's not that way anymore. But as soon as you get into town, you see this huge pile of metal on the side of the road for salvage shop. And it just, all they had was bars and whatever. So when we got married, I said, I'll never live in Tucson. But one night I woke up, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. It was like 92 degrees outside. We were dying. And I said, what's it like in Tucson? And of course, back then, Tucson wasn't as big as it is now. It's like 72 degrees. I said, well, why don't we take a drive down to Tucson? See if I can find a job. So I don't remember how I answered the ad, but there was a guy in Tucson that had just bought an Instaprints franchise. Took his life savings, poured it into the business, and of course you're going to lose money for a while, but then you have to eventually turn a profit. Well, he was losing tens of thousands of dollars every month. And so I met with him. And I told him, I said, here's my resume, here's what I've done. I said, I think I can help you. I really think I can help you. I think we can turn the store around, and you should be making a profit within the next couple months. It's really not your fault because he didn't know what he was doing. They didn't really train them well. They train you corporately, and then it's up to you to find a pressman that knows what he's doing, instead of you being able to teach a pressman on how to do it. And I had all that experience. So he says, I want you. I said, well, here's the thing. I said, I want every Friday sundown to Saturday sundown off. So I want every Saturday off. Why? Every Saturday? How can we do that? I said, I will do this for you, or you can let me go, but it's our Sabbath. The fourth commandment, I will not work on those hours. I don't care if it's the biggest account you've got. It comes in and says, I need to talk to Chris. I'm not here. And he said, well, okay, we'll do it. And I said, and the other thing is when your sales volume gets to here, I want a percentage. And 5% or something. And he said, you think you can get it up to here? And I said, well, I think it will just automatically by us doing working hard. Because he really was a good salesman. Just wasn't a good manager. And he said, sure. And I said, okay. So we quit up there, came down here, found a place, started working, and business just started taking off. The Lord was really blessing. And he started making really good money. Now it's like tithe, just like we talk about with tithe. Tithe on $1,000 isn't that much. Tithe on $100,000, that's a lot. So that 5% to them, when I started making, when they started making big money, and my 5% was really, really growing, oh, you're getting so much money, but you're getting this much more. Yeah, but it's our store. Well, human nature. So they were always ragging on me about how much money I was making, even though it was making them money. Now, I think I might have even sarcastically said, well, do you want me to slow down and lose some business for you? So you don't have to pay me as much? No, they wanted me to say that you could cut my percentage. But they were bothering me enough that all of a sudden I get a call one day from these two guys in Tucson, Gary and Stan, the two that had caused the big ruckus and split the store. Hey, Chris, we'd like to take you to lunch. And I said, not interested. No, come on, just talk. No, not interested. Sorry, guys. A couple months went by. Harassment still. And then that was another thing. Bonnie comes in, his wife, and she says, it's not true about you not being able to work on Saturday. I said, what are you talking about? She says, we were at the swap meet, and we met a Seventh-day Adventist that was there selling, and that's not, you can work on the Sabbath. I said, you know what? This may sound really harsh. I don't know who these people are, but they're not Seventh-day Adventists. They may say they're Seventh-day Adventists, but Seventh-day Adventists keep the Sabbath. And I'm a Seventh-day Adventist that keeps the Sabbath. So the harassment kept coming. Gary and Stan called a couple more times. And finally, the third time they called, I had bought enough of Bonnie. She just went, and I said, okay, I'll talk. That's all. No, that's fine. Let's go. Go to lunch. Well, what was happening is word of mouth was getting out, and what a good job. All the printing was coming out beautiful, very few redos, and their customers were coming to us. And so they were getting hurt. And so he said, we want you to come work for us. I said, after everything we've been through, and they said, you won't ever have to work on the Sabbath. And I said, well, the store will be open, but you don't have to work on the Sabbath. And I said, okay, well, what's your, so they showed me a plan that they had, and it was much better than I was doing now. And I said, okay, but I want a contract. What? I said, I want a contract. What do you mean you want a contract? I said, I want a contract that says, and it can be yearly, that says, under no circumstances will he be forced to work from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, and it will not impede him having his job. Oh, okay, we'll do that. So they signed a contract, and I went to work at the #1 store, the Speedway store, and it started to take off. Because of the Lord. It was all because of the Lord. Any talent that I had, it was because the Lord was giving me the wisdom. And I know that for a fact, because I would have a problem with something, and they would come to me and say, what are we going to do about this? I hear about this new thing out for the press, and I don't know anything about it. I said, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden the phone would ring, and they want to talk to the manager. Hey, I'm selling this thing for your printing press. It'll cause you to do this, this, and this. So now I knew it. So the Lord was really helping me all the way along. So the store was growing and growing and growing. And one day, one of my pressmen was a Jewish pressman, Jewish man, Jewish boy, younger than me. And he comes up to me and he goes, why do you keep the Sabbath? And I said, why don't you keep the Sabbath? This is your heritage. Well, because those things aren't important. I said, so we started to talk, and we started to have a Bible study. And I said, why do you do this? What do you believe? I said, because we believe that the Old Testament is just as important as the New Testament, or vice versa. I said, it's just a continuation. The Sabbath has always been, it's not Sunday, it wasn't changed to Sunday. The Lord kept the Sabbath when he came out of the tomb, and it's just a continuation, and this is what we're supposed to do. And Jesus was the Messiah. There's so many different things in the Bible that show that he was the promised one. And two of my counter girls are listening to this from a distance. And we were working. We weren't wasting time. I was doing some stuff, and he was doing some stuff. And he didn't seem too interested, and I said, that's the answer to your question. And the next thing I know, the two girls come up to me, and they say, hey, we were listening to that. What is all that about? And so I told them a little bit, and I said, why don't you come to our house for dinner? You know, because they would work half a day Saturday. And after we got out of church, we would have them over, and we could talk to them. And so I gave them my testimony. Lenore gave her testimony, and they were just like deer in the headlights listening. And went through how wonderful it is to find out that there's a reason for life, and would you guys like to have Bible study? Oh, absolutely. And so a retired minister friend of ours and his wife were really good friends, and they came over, and we had a Bible study. There were two of them to start out with, and then the one girl's boyfriend, live-in boyfriend, started to join after a few months. And they were just taking it all in. And all of a sudden, one day I'm at work, and they came up to me and they go, we're going to go in and tell Gary and Stan we're not working on Sabbath anymore. Because they weren't Adventist yet. I said, okay, good for you. In the back of my mind, I thought, not good for me. I mean, this is going to create... So they went back there, and they talked to him, and they were in there a minimum of an hour. It seemed like 3 hours, but it was probably more like a little over an hour. And they came back, and they went back there doing what they were supposed to do in their station, helping customers. And I waited and waited, and sure, about 20 minutes later, Chris, we need to talk to you in the office. And I thought, here it comes. I sat down, and they said, we were having a talk with girls, and we want you to be the district manager for all the stores, and we're going to close them all on the Sabbath. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I said, what? They said, yeah, we're gonna close them on the Sabbath, and we'll see how it goes. And 158 print shops in Tucson, and they're all telling them, you guys are nuts. Go ahead, close on the Sabbath. You know, that's good for us. We're going to get all your business. And the Lord blessed. And the stores grew. All the stores grew. And they were closed one day, you know, the 3/4 of a day that they were normally open. That was usually the catch-up day. But the pressman, the Jewish pressman that started the whole thing, he started griping. He wanted to work on the Sabbath. He wanted to make that extra money. That was his extra day. And so that didn't work out. Anyways, so I didn't make my outline on this. I got to put it all together again. Things kept getting better and better and better. And, I know what it was. Gary and Stan, who now had become president and vice president of their corporation that they started after splitting from their first corporation, they had a falling out. And Stan comes to me and he says, I'm going to buy Gary out. I want you to be the vice president. And I said, okay. And I know what Testimonies Volume 9 says about going into business with, because part of it was stock and all that, going into business with non-believers. But they put it together so that I got a piece of 2 stores, and the other guy that got the other piece was this guy named Jim Zook, which was a good friend of mine, and he was a Christian. He wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist, but he was a tithing Christian. So I didn't talk to the pastor. I thought, that should be fine. There's tithe coming out of both ends of that. I think it'll be okay. So I became the vice president of the store. We continued on. We opened stores. I was training people. I was getting bonuses like you couldn't believe. And I mean, it was just great to put my kids through church school. And then all of a sudden, my wife got sick. And I mean, she got sick. This very rare autoimmune disease, cryoglobulinemia, that they knew very little about, struck her with a vengeance. And nephrologist, she was losing her kidneys, and the nephrologist said, I'm going to find out everything I can on this disease. We're going to figure out how to fight this thing. And he would go, that was early internet. It was probably more for the medical field than anything. It probably wasn't real public like we use. And he went from country to country, and there were only a handful of people that had that disease, and they would die. And over here, a handful, terminal. And so he told me, and even the oncologist, hematologist said, we're going to fight this thing, it's going to be fine. But then he told me, I don't know, I don't think she's going to make it. And she had plasmapheresis, plasma exchanges. There was one time when she was in the hospital, how many weeks, 5 weeks? And she was being fed through tubes, and she was just, it was terrible. And here I am responsible for all this business, both of my kids in church school. And I said, kids are important, my wife's important, business is not as important. And I remember one time, I'd take the kids to school, I'd go to the hospital, hang out at the hospital, maybe check in to see what was going on, go back to the hospital. And I remember one time, Stan came to the hospital and he says, are you still working for us? And that made me mad. But anyways, long story short, she got better. They pulled out the stops. They hit her with chemo, and they hit her with everything. They'd hit her with chemo, and then they'd come in with all these platelets that they had to give her because they killed all her platelets. Anyway, so she started to get better, but obviously not well enough to ever go back to work. So all of a sudden, we lost that income. And we had just bought a big house with a swimming pool and all that kind of stuff for the kids because we wanted all the church kids to end up at our house instead of at other, places. And so we were forced to sell that house, which was fine. Then we moved on. And things settled down. She's had, nothing as big as that first one, but she's had some times when she's coded one time for 8 minutes. The paramedic said it's amazing that she has a 1% chance of surviving that, and she did. And I know she hates me to talk about it. So anyways, we got to the point where the corporation was doing so well, but the printing business was changing electronically. So if you were having a convention in Chicago and you needed brochures, but you were here in Arizona, it didn't make as much sense to print your brochures in Arizona and then ship them or take them to Chicago. It was better if you could design them here and then send them electronically and have them printed on the other end. We were 28 stores in Arizona. We weren't 500 nationwide. And so we realized that we were going to become a dinosaur if we didn't do something. So put packets together, offered the stores to numerous large franchises, and we had some bites, nibbles, and all of a sudden it was Quick Copy, as a matter of fact, the one guy that I went to work for, Quick Copy Corporation, came in and they looked at everything and they said, no, InstiPrints, I'm sorry. InstiPrints. Quick Copy did look at it, but they didn't buy InstiPrints. And they put a multi-million-dollar offer in. And of course, I didn't own any part of the corporation. I was the vice president because you had to have a vice president, and you had to have somebody that had to do all the work. But I only had part of those two little stores. And one store would make $20,000 a month, the other one would lose $20,000 a month. So it wasn't like you were making any money on it. But I was able to sell that and recoup some money. But so we sold it to, what did I say? InstiPrints. And they came out and met with me, and all the franchises said, nope, we're not signing franchise agreements, we're not going to go to InstiPrints, we're staying right here. And they said, well, you're going to blow the deal. And so it was my job, and I didn't have a problem with it because I believed in it, to go in and convince each one of those stores that it was in their best interest to sell out. I'm not letting anybody see my P&Ls but you. Nobody's going to look at my P&Ls but you. No, it's not going to work that way. The corporation, they do things their way, but it behooves you to sign a new franchise agreement. So I convinced them all to do that. InstiPrints was so happy that I was doing such a good job of helping them that I had gone back to the first store in Tucson that I had run, that it was now run by an ex-federal agent who bought it as a franchise. And he was losing money. And I went to him and I said, I used to go in and look at his P&Ls, and they always look good. And I said, how can you be losing money? Well, I do such a book things. And I said, I'll come to work for you. I'll take a tremendous cut in pay, and I'll help you turn the store around, because I've run this store. I know this store's got super potential. And we put a structure together, and I said, I got to have insurance for my wife and myself, and I need a company vehicle. And a minimum base pay with promises of bonuses and percentages as we grew. And he said, yeah. So we sold the corporation. I went to work for him, which really made Stan upset. InstiPrints hired me to change over all the stores. All their signage, all their cabinetry, all their storefronts, everything, all the remodels. I was to handle that with the suppliers because that's what I had done in the past. So I was working for one, I was working for that, I was double dipping, which really helped us to get over the crunch of making so much less money here. Well, InstiPrints was interested in keeping me. So it got to the night of the big changeover, all the signage was done, and they were having a kickoff weekend here in Tucson, and the president of InstiPrints, they were getting ready to catch a plane, and he calls me and he says, can I meet you? What time will you be there tonight? And I said, I won't be there tonight. He said, what? And I said, it's a Sabbath. And then I could see it in my mind's eye. A guy in the background goes, what? And he goes, and he stopped. And I could see that the guy was talking to me, the president was telling him, don't say anything. Okay, well, if that's your choice. And I said, that's my choice. I'd love to be there. I'd love to help out. I've done all I can. It's the Sabbath. I can't be there. So I started working for Larry, and it was struggle. We were struggling other than we had money for reserves. And all of a sudden, I get a call from Pima College. Chris, we heard that you're no longer, doing this and that. Is that true? Yeah, I'm just working for Larry. We want you to run the printing program at Pima College. And I said, what days is school? Monday through Friday. I said, okay, I'm interested in talking. Okay, we need to meet with you tomorrow. No, tomorrow's the Sabbath. I can't meet with you tomorrow. That's the only day that they're willing to meet with the prospective teachers. I can't be there. So I hung up, and I was a little discouraged, but I thought, you know what? The Lord must have something better. And sure enough, we started to grow and grow and grow, and the Lord replaced everything that I had lost. And then I was in a head-on collision, and that stopped everything. I had my first back surgery from those herniated discs in 1989, and I was doing pretty well. And then I was coming home in the company truck, and this guy in a big SUV, I never saw anything other than glass, and was unconscious and woke up, and they had me strapped and my neck was swelling up and I couldn't breathe, and the guys said, it's okay. And then I turned sideways, I looked, and the truck was just annihilated. And I had the shoulder harness on, the airbag went, and my head still went, not through the window, but, hit the window. My knees hit the dash, broke the dash in two places, because the bigger you are, it's not so fun. It's not good to be big all the time. And got to the hospital, and no broken bones. But I didn't feel well. I was unconscious. I had a concussion, but no broken bones. So when I got home that night, I felt like I was on fire. My whole body was, it was like, oh, how am I going to do? Again, long story short, I recovered after about 15 or 16 days, tried to go back to work slowly, always had a problem, and then found out that soft tissue damage was big. It messed up my back again, and then I also herniated a disc that was pinching my spinal cord almost in half. And so that my neurosurgeon said, that's got to be taken care of because if somebody slaps you on the back too hard, you're going to be paralyzed. So I had to have my neck fused and went back to work, and I just couldn't handle the same load anymore. So I told Larry, I said, I need a 6-week leave of absence because it was allowed in the handbook. And I left for 6 weeks, and at the end of the 6 weeks, I said, I need some more time. I'm still not ready to go back to work. And when I went back and asked for more time, he said, we can't give you any more time. I said, well, I guess I'm done here then. I knew that I could get a job with any one of the other stores. I had a great rapport with all of the owners, no problems whatsoever. And I had many of them wanting me to work for them, and I would go and I would work for a few hours, and my back would just be killing me. I mean, I tried everything. They said, you can do anything you want. You can just sit at the computer and you can do estimating, you can write manuals, you can do whatever you want to, but I just never could do enough. For 6 months I struggled, and then finally I filed for disability. At the exact same time that my wife went on dialysis. So even that was a blessing because she was really struggling. I mean, I had to take her to dialysis, and she was very depressed about it. And it was a full-time job just trying to keep your chin up. But I don't know. What else do you want me to say, Pat? The rest is history. I got this guy to come here. And you got it a little bit wrong. Just a tiny little bit. When Michael told me, hey, I've got this guy, and he said, this is, I guess, before he talked to you, and he said, and he would really be good. He'd be a perfect fit for your church. And we had already flown in 2 or 3 candidates at the expense of the conference and rejected them because we're picky. And I said, they'll never fly him in. He says, this is in Phoenix. I said, what? So then I called Pastor Santana, and I said, I understand you got to go up there and, that you've been holding it. He said, well, yeah. I said, we want to interview him. We want him for the store. And then that's when everything started happening. But they were holding you. I don't know why they were holding you when you were going to resign. They were trying to save you for something else. But anyways, Michael Hassel did it all. He was a blessing to our church when he was here, and he's still a blessing to the church worldwide now. Anyways, there's so much more before I became an Adventist that I could put down. But the Lord has been so, and I know he has for every one of us. Every one of us has unbelievable stories to tell about how the Lord saved them from Lenore has a story where they were driving in their Volkswagen, and a guy was coming straight at him. They prayed, and the next thing they knew, the guy was on the other side of them. What? Oh, that's our wedding picture. I wonder why you guys were laughing at me. It's not that bad. See, I had short hair then. Look how happy she looks.